Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today, we've got a much smaller package than usual. This is a resin printer from Longer3D. It's called the Orange 10. So, Longer sent us this and some resin. Customs found it necessary to open the resin. I'm sure they were wondering what the heck this was. But this one looks like it's a light brown and, well, too light brown. Standard 405 nanometer UV cured resin. So this would be a DLP printer. We've got some filters for putting used resin back in the containers. We have an envelope with a couple extra FEP films. It's going to be very hard to see, but spare film. And then a whole pile of accessories. Oh. All right. So these are the acrylic panels that block UV. They are orange, hence maybe the name, Orange 10. We have a scraper. It is not sharpened. There's some gloves and a USB key, mini SD, micro SD to USB adapter, some Allen keys, power cord and power brick. This looks like it's there we go, the build plate, or at least part of the build plate. One more acrylic panel for the top, and that's everything in there. And that's the base. For such a small printer, this is extremely heavy. And this entire upright assembly, you saw me pulling it right out from there, this is sturdy as all get out. Normally I wouldn't want to yank on that. But you have your kind of typical screws for holding down the vat. You have your LCD screen underneath there. And then this assembly here will slide, we'll have to move this up, will slide on and be held on by this nut. If I'm lucky, I can actually slide that up now. There we go. Inside here, the rail that it's running on is a linear rail. So instead of linear guides or wheels, they're using a linear rail, which should help keep that motion extremely steady. The last thing you want is your Z to have any kind of a wobble in this, which will be immediately visible in your prints. And then this guy slides on. And there we go. That slides on like that. And we'll use these screws on the side to level the build surface. Typically, you loosen them completely. You zero out or home the Z. It's the only direction these move in. Home that Z. Press down on the build plate until it's firm against the FEP. Sometimes you take the vat out and use a piece of paper. We'll go over all of that. And then once you have it leveled, you tighten these to secure everything down. All right, let's plug this in. Small port on the back and a power switch. It's definitely got some cooling for sure. Feels like a wind tunnel coming out of here. I'm gonna turn that off for now. So the build plate, or in this case the resin vat, is secured with these two screws I mentioned earlier. And you have to completely unscrew these from the base unit. Normally it's just like little knobs that come off the top. And the vat itself is all metal. So the walls, the base plate portion of it, that sandwich of FEP film, all metal construction. There's 3 screws on either side and 2 on the short ends. And underneath the vat is, of course, the screen, which you can't really see much here. There's nothing projecting on it, with some black tape around the edges. Put that guy back on there. And I'm curious to do a couple test prints and figure out exactly how to level this, but first we're gonna have to build that enclosure. So normally there's just one kind of cylindrical tube that you slide down over the top of one of these printers. Some have like a door that flips up. In this case, it's a little bit of a do-it-yourself design where it all snaps together. The most frustrating part is going to be getting all this paper off. All right, after a painful 20 minutes or so, maybe 15 minutes, I got all the paper off, and now we're ready to start assembling this. So the sides have little notches, either protruding or inset. So we'll just kind of line these up like that. Build a little tower. Too bad they don't click together like Legos or something. And this has got to be this way. And I'm assembling them with these notches on the top because this top plate gets inserted here. Ta-da, it's done. It ended up taking 6 hands to put this together. So you have to kind of balance them, line up the notches, balance them together, put the top in, and then while you're holding that, stretch these elastics over top to kind of hold everything together. Now it's, relatively secure, and this just slides over top of here, like that. Now, I would definitely have liked to have seen something prefabricated or at least a little easier to assemble than this, even if it's, bolted together. Before we do any printing, we're going to want to level the base plate. We'll do this quickly since we have resin in the vat already. Turn the printer on and loosen the 2 screws on either side. That will allow the plate to move freely. We can move it up and down. Once you've loosened the 2 screws, which I've already leveled this, so I'm not doing that, we will go to Settings, and then we will go to Move, and we'll go to Z = 0. And it warns you to make sure that there's nothing in the vat, no model on the base plate or anything before you do this, because that would ram that into the screen below. It will go to what it believes Z = 0 to be. And because you have those 4 screws loosened, it will allow the plate to move up or down as required. So once it's in there, with a gloved hand, push down on either side of the base plate so that it's making equal contact with the screen on the front and back, as well as both sides. So press down evenly, and then tighten those screws while you're still holding it down. Other people will take the entire resin vat out and use a piece of paper underneath and press down against the piece of paper. I found that on this particular machine, pressing down on the resin vat worked very well for me. Once that's done and you've tightened those, you can press Z = 0 again, and it will just lift up and go back down, and now you're set. Going back out to the main menu, and we can now throw this on. On the main menu, we've got File, and inside File, we've got a bunch of different test prints. There's the zombie hunter head and some geometric polygon shapes. So if I choose, say, the zombie hunter and hit play, it warns you and says, make sure that there's no model below the build plate because it's going to bring it down to the resin tank, obviously. And it shows you a preview of the zombie hunter head and a timeline, number of layers and what layer you're on. And it says that it's printing. It also tells you the temperature. So currently it says it's 24 degrees Celsius. This is something interesting. In my shop at home, it was like 19 degrees, and I was having major bonding issues between the resin and the base plate. Things were not sticking well, and they would end up just sitting in the vat. So temperature definitely does affect the cure rate of resins, and it's kind of nice to, at a glance, see what the temperature is in the environment you're printing in. So we'll let that go for a little while. We'll have to top up the tank. We'll print all those test models, and we'll be back. All right, we're back with my assortment of heads and partially severed heads in a geometric shape of sorts. So let's start with the zombie hunter. So this guy is called the zombie hunter. It's a familiar model, you've probably seen it. Turned out pretty well. I mean, it's a little soft in the features, which is kind of to be expected with the X and Y resolution of the printer. But all in all, it turned out fine. no complaints. It stuck to the base plate very well, and they hollowed it, and they put the drain holes at the base plate, which I thought was interesting. It's a great place to hide them, but then when you pull it off the base plate, you turn it around and then the resin starts pouring out the bottom. I didn't really notice that. I took it off the base plate while on the machine and ended up pouring resin all over the place when I wasn't expecting it. But it's hollowed, that's great, saves a lot of resin that way. And it's just a decorative model. It doesn't need to be any stronger than it is. Geometric shape. So I'm not entirely sure if these were supposed to be completely see-through holes in this shape here. Some of them are, for sure, so that they may be closed due to overexposure, or it may have been that they were intended to be closed and some of them underexposed. I'm not sure. There is some white kind of chalky residue. That's actually my fault from my rinsing process. So typically you would use 3 buckets. So I have an initial rinse in 99% isopropyl alcohol, a second rinse in isopropyl. It rinses in the first one for quite a bit. Second one just to kind of rinse off any of that residue, and then a third in clear water. So my alcohol is probably getting a little saturated, or I stirred up other resin residues in the second one. I used to use a lot of white, the Wanhao and Monocure white resin. So that may be from that. Speculation though. This one is the 3 wise skulls. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. And this one is not hollow. So this is like a brick. I was a little disappointed because it used obviously a ton of resin, and as you know, resin's expensive. One thing that did become apparent in this model is that we have some Z banding going on. And it seems more apparent the higher we go. After looking at the printer and homing it from this high height, I could see that there was a wobble in the lead screw. But we've been assured by our rep that will be taken care of as we would expect from Longer. But had we just cut down one of the lead screws we had and replaced it, that would probably be fine. To be honest, I haven't taken it out of the coupler. It could just be improperly mounted in the coupler, but either way, it's a little disappointing to see that on a brand new printer. But this is solid, turned out well. The features are nice and sharp. My headless, doesn't matter, but it is headless because I ran out of resin. So having had this one be solid, I should have expected the next one to be solid, and I ran out of resin. This was an entire bottle, the sample bottle of resin that they provided. And so this one, when I came downstairs, it was just sitting there in midair, going down for the next layer, but there was nothing there, nothing being built, and the resin vat was completely dry. So I grabbed some random resins that I had. This is actually green and black mixed together. I typically wouldn't recommend doing that, but I thought it would be kind of a fun experiment. So I'm not going to fault the printer for any of the quality issues that appear on here other than the Z banding, because as you may be aware, different color resins can need different curing times and curing settings, so different exposure levels, especially as you get into dark, non-transparent, non-translucent resins. But this one cured fine. When I rinsed it, I didn't do as good a job as I thought I did, and so there was still some liquid resin in these shiny spots, so that when I put it into my post-curing chamber and gave it a final cure, those cure up bright and shiny, where everything else has kind of your standard matte-ish finish. But it's especially kind of hard to see with the colors as opposed to these. It's hard to pick up the details, but you can see the hairs in his beard and the wrinkles on his face and the texture on his belt and stuff like that. That all turned out just fine. I did have a little bit of warping on the base plate. So this came with a base plate just like this one. I snapped all of this off because it was warped beyond belief, and even the main piece here is warped. So considering it didn't have a great bond to the base plate and was actually partially peeled off, everything else still turned out a lot better than I expected to see. This used up the rest of my scrap resins that I had to throw in there. Had I had a little more resin kicking around, I probably would have run one more run of this guy, 3rd time's the charm, right? So all in all, for the price point, I'm pretty impressed. One thing that I did like about it was it seems to get itself up to temperature. So the temperature reading I read out was 20 something, and by midway through the print, it was about 32 degrees. You definitely don't want the temperature of your printer to be too high because it will decrease the life of the UV LEDs. And like I said, temperature does have an influence or an effect on the curing time of resins layer by layer. But one thing that I found interesting about this printer is I could use resins that normally my wife finds offensive. She can smell resin from a mile away, and it didn't seem to leak the scent of resin throughout my office and workspace as it normally does on, say, my Anycubic Photon or my D7. And I attribute that, just off the top of my head, to the fact that there's no air intake or exits anywhere in the top of the surface. So this is, you know, for lack of a better term, a sealed enclosure on the top. The Anycubic, for example, has a kind of filter inlet here that it seems to draw air through and then spreads that air throughout the room. So this is just drawing air through the bottom or in through the sides and out through the bottom. I forget which direction it goes, but it is never touching the air that is inside the resin chamber or the curing chamber there, or top chamber of the printer. I'm not even sure what you'd want to call that. So all in all, I'm impressed. I'm more impressed than I thought I would be when we were assembling this lid. Hopefully you found that useful. Remember, like and subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified when we upload more videos like this one. And leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you have any questions about this printer or anything else you've seen on the channel. Thanks for watching.